the PI webinar, Insight at the PI. And today I'm here with folks from the University College Dublin and University of Notre Dame to discuss student sense of belonging. University College Dublin is Ireland's global university, the largest university with 31% of the student body as international students. It's internationally renowned and located in Dublin, Ireland. It's a public research university and offers a wide range of undergraduate and postgraduate programs across various disciplines. Now, Ireland may be known for its hospitality, but at UCD, there are specific initiatives and strategies that also help to foster that strong sense of student belonging. And today I have expert panelists on the call with me who are going to talk about just that. I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves and their role at their university. We'll start with you, Professor O'Riordan.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dolores O'Riordan. I'm the Vice President for Global Engagement at University College Dublin. And my academic background is as a professor of food science, so delighted to be with you today.
Thank you so much. Emer.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emer Clowry-Delaney, and I am the director at our Notre Dame Centre in Dublin. I've been working with Notre Dame in international education for just over 20 years. Delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. Caroline.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Mangan, and I'm the Associate Director for Global Community based in the International Office at University College Dublin.
Fantastic. And I'm also excited to announce that when we're talking about student sense of belonging, it was extremely important for leadership at UCD to have student voice incorporated in that conversation. So we have a student with us on the panel this morning, and that is Jan, who will be introducing as well. Jan?
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to meet you. I'm not sure if you can see me because I'm having some issues with my camera, but it's lovely being here with you all today. My name is Jan. I'm originally from the Czech Republic, and I'm currently a final year student of environmental and sustainable chemistry at UCD. And I spent my last semester on exchange at the National University of Singapore, and it is my pleasure to share a little bit of my experience with student belonging in universities. So it's very nice to meet you all.
Fantastic. So happy to have you here. And we can't see you, but we can hear you. And since our conversation involves student voice, it's very appropriate that we can hear your voice loudly and clearly. So thanks so much for joining us. So we all know that sense of belonging is a vital component of successful university experiences for students. By fostering a welcoming and inclusive environment, universities can help students thrive academically, socially, and personally. And we're going to talk about why that's important and what that means in the UCD context. But before I ask you to jump in and set the stage for us, Dolores, I'm going to welcome our folks who are in the audience with us today to chime in on the poll questions that you see on the right-hand side under the poll icon. As well, give us a shout out. Let us know where you're tuning in from today. And feel free to ask our panelists questions. Comment in the chat, ask them questions, and we will get to as many questions as possible at the end of our discussion here today. So, Dolores, can you set the stage for us, please? What does it look like at UCD?
So, yeah, as a university, we're a very broad disciplined university. We are home to 38,000 students, 33,000 are on our Dublin campus, and of those, 31% of our students are international students. They come from 152 different countries around the world, so it's a very diverse body. As a research-intensive university, we are home to both undergraduate and postgraduate students, and a significant amount of PhD students as well as our international student body. We also have an international staff with over a third of the staff coming from overseas. So in terms of a sense of belonging, going back to my title as VP for Global Engagement, so I look at it very much from a global perspective. And of course, the sense of belonging applies to all students and indeed all our staff. I don't think we can forget that either on our campus. And I always look at it as, particularly for our international students, I use the phrase, you want to be a home to home. So they're coming from one part of the world, but they feel as home in Dublin on a UCD campus as they were in the school they came from or the university they came from. But I suppose it goes beyond settling in, because with the diversity of cultures that we have, we really want the international students, of course, to settle in here and identify with the Dublin campus. But it's equally important that our national students are exposed to a global environment, and that together the student body are really developing that sense of global awareness, global citizenship, to be the future global leaders. So that integration together, I think, is really critical.
Thanks so much, Dolores. And I appreciate that you added in the faculty and staff piece as well, because certainly that is part of this equation as well. We want our faculty and staff to have that sense of belonging to the institution so that they can help create those strategies and support those initiatives that you have in place to help foster students' sense of belonging. I want to welcome folks here from all across the world, and I see that you are greeting us in the chat, and I want to say hello to you from Dublin, Canada, Sweden, Chicago, Belgium, Memphis, Lincoln, Connecticut, Indiana, and all sorts of places in between. So welcome. And if you're just tuning in with us now, don't forget to weigh in on the poll questions that we're going to be discussing shortly. So Dolores, you've set the stage for us in talking about what the context is at UCD for this sense of belonging, and really looking at that big picture of what it looks like from an institutional level, and with the international piece being key to your sense of belonging student engagement strategy, both with staff and students. I want to ask you about challenges that institutions face in creating that sense of belonging, and then also throw it out to some of your colleagues as well. But if you can start us off, Dolores, that would be great.
I suppose one of the key actions that we take from a UCD point of view, particularly when students arrive on the campus, is emphasizing the social development aspect of their experience. You know, we are attracting the brightest and the best from around the world, and of course they're highly motivated to do well academically, but it's really in the early days trying to stress that settling in to the campus and your academic studies is very much dependent on flying from a social point of view as well. So there are lots of opportunities to develop social skills, and we certainly put on a lot of, even within the curriculum and outside the curriculum, in terms of building the teamwork and the communication. And there really are a vast arrays of sports clubs, fantastic sports facilities. There's every type of society they could want. So I think there's something for everybody within the campus. And that's a key bit of settling the students in, and of course, as well as making sure that they are aware of all the supports that are there from an academic perspective, because to thrive and have a sense of belonging, I think all aspects of your life have to be in harmony. So they need the confidence of performing from an academic point of view as well. So back to your question then, in terms of the challenges, with that social piece and opportunities for social interaction being core to what we do, certainly we're still seeing the fallout from a COVID point of view, because many students went through, particularly if they're coming to us as postgrad, a lot of their undergraduate years line where they really would have had little opportunities for social interaction. So they're not, as a student coming from overseas, they're not only trying to adapt to a new culture and make friends in a new social environment, but often it's their first experience of trying to interact with their peers in social environments as well. So that has been really a particular challenge to us, and a challenge from a social point of view, also a challenge from an academic point of view, that students feel they did quite well in terms of learning online, and there was no real need to be physically present on the campus. And particularly if English wasn't their first language, they liked the idea of being able to listen back to the lectures, listen to the tapes, and not have to adjust to the various accents that you're going to hear on our Dublin campus. So trying to get them to physically engage, because I think the sense of place is very important. As a university, we do, as I say, try to provide an environment where you're encouraging students to interact with each other inside and outside of the classroom. So if a lot of those skill sets were never really developed in the earlier years of their education, we are finding that is a major challenge to us. And I'm sure it's the same for universities and indeed schools the world over.
Well, your colleagues on the call would certainly agree with you looking at the poll results, Dolores, and of the respondents, over half had indicated that cultural and social isolation are the biggest barriers to student belonging at their institution. And interesting that you note that the COVID fallout is still a reality. As we approach 5 years after the start, oftentimes we can let that sort of fall to the wayside and thinking of it as something in the past, but very important that you note that it is still a reality and we are still dealing with some of those consequences. Another thing that you mentioned was the clubs, the facilities, the societies. There's something for everyone, and you note that it's important for students to know about these things. So I'm going to ask a student, Jan, how do you find out about these incredible opportunities that are offered on campus? What are some of your ways to learn about what UCD offers?
From my perspective, I have to say that there is just so much stuff going on, and there are so many things that a student can get involved in, that rather the question could be how not to be so overwhelmed in all the opportunities that there are there. And it just, especially in the beginning, it is overwhelming and it is not the easiest to navigate through everything there is to offer. So I think that, especially in the early years when students come on campus, it's just very important to explore carefully and see what cause I would like to donate my time to. So it is all the different Freshers Week events where societies introduce their activities. It's all the sport clubs that introduce each other. This is the basis. And I think that after that, once a student gets involved in one activity, the other activities open up and it is more natural to find about them. So I think that especially in the early weeks of studying in university, it's very important to engage with all the societies and clubs. That's the first step.
So that's great advice for any students who may be watching as well, is get involved and do so early. Thanks so much for that. Emer and Caroline, I'm looking at the rest of these poll results and I see some of the barriers noted are financial issues, mental health issues, cultural and social isolation we mentioned, campus size and structure, and then there's one vote for other. So I'd love for people to add to the chat if they could, what some of those other struggles are. But your thoughts on these answers and anything else you'd add to this list?
Yeah, I might come in there. So from the perspective of global community team in UCD, I suppose the sense of belonging is probably at the heart of everything that we do within our team to try and foster that sense of connection to our institution, to our country, to peers, but also for individuals to, I suppose, what we see is a greater sense of belonging emerging maybe for their own sense of identity or their own communities back home, where that connection strengthens when you leave, right? But Yanis mentioned like societies and clubs and activities and all of these. I suppose when we think about belonging, our minds tend to go to kind of the warm, fuzzy things that create this nice, nurturing environment for students on campus. And I guess many of our colleagues who are joining us on the call are probably familiar with these types of activities, whether it be through sports or societies. But I'd like to just kind of pull it back to kind of that hierarchy of needs, right? And we think about what are the essential things that students need on arrival into a new country, and thinking about accommodation, non-EU students coming to Ireland, thinking about their immigration support need, and then thinking about orientation from the perspective of equality, diversity, and inclusion, right? So maybe if we just take that first area around accommodation and immigration support. So the global community team is structured in a way that we actually respond directly to those different areas of needs to help students navigate when you're thinking about coming to Ireland to study, to where are you going to live and where your community is going to be based. But something that I think we overlook in terms of when we're thinking about belonging is the immigration struggles that students who are from outside the EU have to navigate because of where they are born. Okay, so in thinking about passport privilege, and some of us maybe are not familiar with, therefore, the difficulties that our students from outside the EU have to navigate. And that sense of belonging then is impacted, I suppose, by those struggles that you might encounter, whether it's through visa applications, registration process, the additional fees you may have to pay, and just the additional workload and bureaucracy. While that's a bureaucratic thing, I think it also has that emotional impact in terms of your sense of belonging to place. And that's why we have a dedicated student immigration support team within UCD Global, because we recognize that those bureaucratic pieces are as critical to a student's sense of belonging as are the social and cultural interactions that they may have once they are settled. So I think in terms of our resourcing and our investments and our structure in UCD Global, we've really thought through that student journey and pathway of where are you going to live, how can we support you, how are you going to make sure that you are legally compliant to study in Ireland, we will support you through the Immigration Support Service, and how are you going to find your spaces of community and friendship, we will support you through our engagement and outreach team. So I think we shouldn't overlook those initial steps, because they are the foundations of creating that sense of belonging, and what comes after then is just all a bonus and extra and will lead to a really fulfilling and nurturing experience.
Fantastic. And thanks for outlining that student journey as a continuum and all of those important touch points along the way. Emer.
Yeah, just to piggyback on the accommodation, I think it is a crucial piece of the experience, and I think to be able to eliminate the hassles involved in that, just to allow you to really kind of really begin to enjoy the entire journey. For us, it's really important that our students who are American coming over for one semester to Dublin, to UCD, that they're integrated with students in their accommodation setup, so that they're not kind of living in a bubble. And again, UCD have been really good at supporting us and helping us ensure that they're not in a little pack of six or whatever of their own kind, even though they may not even know each other from the University of Notre Dame, but just that they get to meet new friends from all over the world. And that's been really, really important, I think, in that whole idea of feeling a belonging and sharing maybe the complexities of being in a new place together. A challenge that I often think about is the assumptions that our students have as they are arriving into Ireland. And one of those things is, we all speak, most of our students speak English fluently, but just because we speak English doesn't mean that we all speak the same language, and we interpret really differently. And so that whole idea of kind of the expectation and assumption as to it'll be replicated or maybe exactly like it was in their home institution is a really interesting struggle sometimes for us, and then just accepting, I suppose, that it's going to be very different maybe to the experience that they had in the US, culturally, socially, personally, in lots of different ways, and really making sure that our students are prepared for that difference and to be able to celebrate what that might look like in the longer run. But in the opening days after they've touched down, it is sometimes very challenging to kind of navigate through that in the first instance.
Thanks so much for adding that. We heard about the logistics and Caroline's comments, and got a shout out in the chat as well about that, but certainly important to consider the eliminating the hassles, as you mentioned, and then really how do we manage the assumptions that students, or the perceptions that students come to our campuses with. So thanks so much. And also shout out to Jan for sharing your experiences. I want to talk about UCD, the strategy in general, and where in that strategy sense of belonging fits. Now, I had the great pleasure of being on UCD campus for the new president, Professor Orla Bailey's inaugural lecture. So Dolores, can you share some insights with us about this strategic plan that's going to be unveiled before the end of the year, and where in this plan does sense of belonging fit in?
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, delighted to perhaps to give context in terms of developing the strategic plan. So it's over a year ago, I think, since you attended the inaugural speech. So this strategy has been in the making for that length of time. And the reason for that period was the president decided to make the process very consultative. So stakeholders from all walks, with a key focus on internal stakeholders, that being faculty, staff, students, were consulted. A number of world cafes were held for further discussing some of the points that were coming out from the consultations. So we're at the point of having distilled what we heard. So it's very much of now delivering back. This is what you said. This is what we will now do. As with any university, the focus of the strategy will be about learning, very much transformative learning. It will be about the impact of our research, and also engaging for impact with the wider society. And for all of those three areas, which I think are the building blocks of any university, I don't think there's anything surprising about what's emerging from that perspective. But the sense of belonging came out in all three of them. From a learning point of view, particularly the students, that they wanted a learning environment where it was, particularly from an infrastructural point of view, where there were just areas to hang out, to do their group projects. And UCD has done an awful lot in the past. We've had fabulous revamping of our library to encourage students to come together and study. So that was a key bit that was coming out of it, the infrastructure to support the learning. The other was in the learning delivery, particularly from an academic perspective. So something that's been touched on there in terms of the cultural awareness, particularly within our academic community. They felt that there was more of a need for faculty to be aware of. I mentioned with students coming from 152 different nationalities, so the strategy is committing to embedding that within some of our deliverables as well. And then back to a point made earlier, is that for the students to have a sense of belonging, it's important that the staff and faculty have a sense of belonging as well. So, and again, while UCD has a huge amount of community activities, was really that all staff have that pride in UCD, that they feel they belong there, and they in turn would help our students to settle in. So it is going to be a key cornerstone. I think in the initial drafts, I felt it was very repetitive because it was coming from every sphere, that sense of belonging. And I think it is, going back to the points earlier, that while currently the campus feel is very vibrant, for the past 2 years as we were emerging from the pandemic, we really weren't getting the on-campus engagement that we would have had in the past. So I think it's to reinvigorate that and provide all of the resources that we can. So that it had got touched on, but came out quite strongly from the strategy consultations, with certainly the increase in mental health issues and the need for further student support, and particularly interventions to maintain mental health rather than putting the resources for when the problem has already occurred. So certainly there is a commitment in having greater services within our registry office to support the student needs. Adding to the services that we already have. Caroline has outlined some of them, but I think just a greater focus on it, being in touch with the student from day one, and recognize perhaps when someone really isn't settling in, and the impact that can have from an academic point of view. So taking a multi-pronged approach to intervening before the problems become rather big when it's difficult to engage. I think it's back to Jens' point, in terms of societies, it can be overwhelming. And if you're having mental health issues, I think the last thing you need is for someone to saying, oh, there's loads of societies, join the society, where the wherewithal isn't there. So it's being more cognizant of that. So I think it really is going to be a central tenet of the next strategy. It has yet to be approved, I should add, but I feel it would be very odd if that as a key emerging topic doesn't come through in the final strategy.
Thanks so much. Really looking forward to learning more about its rollout once it is unveiled. But really key points that you highlight about being proactive so that these initiatives and these opportunities and activities that are there for staff and students alike can be realized and enjoyed. And so now let's hear from a student, from Jan, about these activities and opportunities. I'd be remiss if I didn't have this conversation and ask these questions about students' supports and student journeys without hearing about your journey, Jan. And I know that you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about, if anything, there's too many opportunities to choose from. It's hard to decide. Can you talk to us about what you have engaged in on campus and beyond, in fact?
Definitely, and I'm quite proud to say that the experience that I had in university, that the academic part has been as important as actually all the extracurricular activities that I have been able to engage in. So in my first year, I did spend most of my time with societies, and still they are the center of my social life, and they were the space where I found most of my friends and very like-minded people who share certain interests. So I was on committee of German society and of LGBTQ society, and I was able to find my community there, but also express myself and really bring to life so many events on campus and make the campus even more vibrant and student friendly. And it also helped me, to foster your personal growth. So you learn to work in people with teams, and you become more complex person, and you improve your cross-cultural awareness, and that also then culminated in me pursuing a semester abroad in Singapore. And those are, again, this is just a tiny fraction of what is there in UCD. So recently I started also a position as campus assistant, which is a UCD version of like a residential assistant, where I support people who live on residences. Usually they are international students who exactly come from a different country, and in their first year they are trying to make Ireland their home. And my role with someone who was there in their position previously is to make them find the space of home, the feeling of home, as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Jan. And I'm going to stay with you for a minute here, if I could, because I've asked university leadership on our panel about any challenges that they think universities in general face and how they might tackle them. And I'll ask you that same question as well. What are some challenges that you believe that universities may face in helping create the sense of belonging for students? And do you have any suggestions for them?
I would say that there are mainly three challenges I was able to identify when I thought about this question previously. And the first one definitely is the actual overwhelming that I've already mentioned. So I think it's important to maybe take a step back and really think about what I want to achieve and what will be the best choice for me at the moment. And it is also very important to connect students across different years, because in my first year I got a great peer mentor, and I also see in the poll here that people agree that it is something that can really help students feel as they belong. So the peer mentoring group was very helpful when I was matched with a peer mentor who was in second year, and it was also after COVID. So we didn't have, the peer mentor herself didn't have that many experiences on campus, because we just came back in, it was 2021. But looking back, the mentoring scheme is really something that can help students navigate in the first place. The second challenge, I would say, is the belonging in wider context. I think it is challenging to belong to university. And once you find yourself, you belong in a university community, then you start thinking about belonging to the wider, maybe Dublin, an Irish community. So I feel like I have really found my place, and many students have found their place on campus, but they didn't feel like they are living in the country they're actually living in. And that is also a very important factor if you want to call a place your home. You need to really feel like you know it and you belong there. And finally, especially in the Irish context, it is the commuting that is creating a lot of challenges. Many students, and we had to keep it in mind when we organized events on behalf of societies, commute even more than 1 hour, 2 hours each way to campus daily. And it is very easy to host an event, in the evening, in afternoon for students who live on campus. But then we are excluding, for example, those that are not as lucky and cannot afford or do not have a place very close to the university campus. So that is also a major challenge that students and university needs to overcome, is to consider how far some of the students have to commute.
Thank you so much. That's really great information to consider when planning an event. Again, we can offer all of the greatest clubs and activities and events in the world, but we need to make sure that students know about them and that they can get to them. So thanks so much for sharing that. Caroline, I'd like to move over to you for a minute and talk about some of the context that Dolores has shared in her opening and setting that stage for UCD and sense of belonging, and also in sharing about the strategic plan. And so can you talk to me about how UCD goes about creating that plan and enacting that plan and putting that into practice and giving it life? And what specifically is UCD doing that is particularly unique or innovative?
Yeah, well, I think UCD is actually doing an excellent job at investing resources and time into creating a greater sense of belonging for all students. I think there's such consideration and really dedicated staff members across the board in all of our services, and our sports facilities are world class. Our societies, over 100 different societies that students can engage in, a really successful peer mentor program with over 650 more seasoned students who volunteer their time to help new starts, and really successful initiatives, I think, across the board. When we think about international students, I suppose I've spoken to you a little bit about the investment in the global community team and the resources that we provide. And also the Global Lounge is really a world leading space in terms of a multifunctional space that really provides opportunities for staff and students to express their kind of engagement with the world and to host events and activities that really enhance integration. So while students may perceive it to be a space for international students, which in some ways it is creating that home away from home by having a dedicated space for students in the international office space, it is also increasingly becoming that space of integration that Dolores mentioned. And I think we're really looking kind of beyond just fulfilling the needs of international students to meet other students into how are we actually integrating our students together. So, and I think you have to be really intentional about that, right? I think it's really important to have an integration plan as opposed to just assuming that a diverse student population are going to just naturally integrate, right? So having dedicated, really thought through plans. And just this year within my team, we appointed a global integration coordinator whose specific role is thinking about how we integrate together as a diverse student population. Other initiatives that I think are really unique to UCD and that we are doing extremely well on would be around the area of active global citizenship. So UCD volunteers overseas, a recent award-winning organization from University of 21, and has been running for 20 years. I myself managed UCDVO for 10 years, and I was a participant in UCDVO when I was a student in UCD 20 years ago as well. So I can speak quite directly to the value of international volunteering and global citizenship as a way to enhance that sense of belonging. And like Jan said there about commuter students, so I myself was a commuter student when I was going to UCD 20 years ago. 2 hours on the bus in, 2 hours on the bus home. Didn't have a positive student experience really because of that, because there wasn't enough time to engage. But then I saw a poster on the wall in the arts building about UCDVO, and I thought, my God, that's what I want to do. And I applied and I got offered to go to India on an international volunteering program with the late Father Tony Coote, who founded UCDVO. And that was like the moment of belonging for me when I thought, okay, that's a program. And Jan also mentioned something at the start when he said it can be overwhelming, but when you find a cause that you want to donate your time to. So he mentioned purpose there, right? So I also think that UCD is really good at helping students to find a sense of purpose, whether it be in fighting for a cause, whether it be through activism, through volunteering, through a passion, a hobby, those kind of things that nurture your sense of connection to a place. But just to come back to the volunteering aspect, so like by providing students that opportunity to connect with the world around them through international volunteering, global citizenship, it can actually really enhance the student's sense of belonging back to UCD in the same way I mentioned about going abroad and mobility to Singapore. But yet when he came back to UCD, probably has really enhanced his sense of connection to UCD. So mobility, I know it sounds like a contradiction, that going away from the university can actually strengthen your connection to it. I think UCD is doing extremely well, and in terms of how it supports students to go on mobility, whether it be traditional exchange, volunteering, internships, but also in terms of trying to help students find a sense of purpose. So that, I think that's key, and I think that's where we're excelling really, really well.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And that really is a nice segue into the next question that I have for you all. And that is about integrating students across campuses, between campuses, and the partnerships that you have with other universities. So, Emer, I'd love to pull you in, if you can give us some context about the current partnership between UCD and Notre Dame. And then what are some of those supports that are in place? How do you collaborate, and how do you support the student journey across two institutions?
Thank you. So we've been partnered with UCD for a long number of years. It began in the late 1990s, and we send, which I hate the term send, but about 25 students touch down on campus each semester from the University of Notre Dame, and then they study across arts and letters, or the humanities, social sciences and law, science, engineering, and business. So kind of quite a broad diversity of students that touch down. I think that the sense of belonging begins long before they actually touch down physically on campus. And, first impressions, I think that they do register even at those first encounters, whether it's via email or a pre-departure information, or what they hear even from their students, their peers who have gone before them. So I think there's many touch points before arrival that really do solidify what the experience is going to be like, and how they do feel belonging and connection to the place. I would say that UCD, our partnership is really strong for us. It's really important that their academics are the priority before they touch down, and that they have the prereqs reached, or the prerequisites, and that their academics are aligned and with what they're studying on their home campus, so that it is going to be of significant value to their learning when abroad. UCD have amazing college directors who reach out to our students once they have been selected, and really help before they even touch down to calm them and reassure them that they will be in the right classes, they will be getting the correct credits, and that their academic journey is absolutely as cohesive and comprehensive as it needs to be before they arrive, and that their academic directors back on campus and professors will be relieved and excited about the experiences ahead of them. I do think that communications is so imperative, and again, that's from those emails that they receive, not bombarded with information that is not relevant at the time, but actually just kind of piecemeal information that kind of comes out, so that they know that they have to respond, and they kind of get that clear instruction. So I think that gives huge reassurance to them and to families as well. I think they play a really core part of our student experience, that they're reassured that this is not those stupid movie generalizations around a waste of time, a break, all of those things that are unfortunately kind of lead maybe out on that narrative and discussion around what study abroad is going to be, but actually just really does confirm what it will be like. So I think, they're kind of the most important pieces. I think, again, I touched on housing already. I think that's really significant, and knowing that there will be a place. And just to follow on what Caroline said about coming home, it is really interesting to us, even in the first few weeks when students go traveling with their clubs and societies, which is an absolute core part of our students' experience. But when they go away for the weekend, it doesn't even have to be outside of the country, but if they head down to another county to play a game, or ultimate frisbee is a big one for us, if they go off to play in that type of competition, when they return back to the campus, they always say the feeling of returning home was immense, and it makes them realize that they belong. So we would always say go away to come back and to kind of feel what that might mean for you, and it's always a relief, which is just a really lovely, and you can't teach that, right? That's just the experience that people have when they come back. Yeah, there are my thoughts there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Emer. And you highlight the importance of communication in this collaboration strategy and conversations and ongoing conversations. And I'm just impressed by looking at the chat very briefly and seeing the folks in the room engaging in conversation, both with you all as panelists and with each other, and adding their comments and their own strategies as well, both in the polls, in the chat, and in the questions. And I want to make sure that we have time to get to these great questions that the audience has posed for you, and then voted on as well. So in talking about high touch strategies and practices, how do you all handle high touch practices at scale? Any thoughts around that? And I'll throw this out to the entire group.
Maybe, Maureen, could you just explain what you understand as high touch there at scale, just for us, in case we're cross cultures?
Yeah, sure. So the way I understand it, and Katya, if you want to chime in here on the chat, as this is your question, please feel free to do that. But I'm thinking of practices or initiatives that impact a high number of students, a great number of students. And then, you're talking about collaborating with other institutions that you have across the globe. So how are you, are there plans in the strategic plan to take these strategies that you have to the next level, or continuing to iterate and innovate around some of these strategies that you already have in place? Any plans to engage with other institutions in the works for the future, and taking some of these strategies elsewhere to institutions you're not currently partnering with? And Katya adds, or high touch as in personalized, individualized attention. So you talk about mentorship programs as one way to personalize it, or working with a guidance counselor, any one-on-one. Earlier mentioned the mental health issues. So how do you take some of these really personalized, individualized pieces and then bring it to larger groups?
Yeah, maybe just to
Caroline, you have a lot of initiatives from that perspective.
Yeah, just to speak from the student experience perspective, obviously there's a lot of work going on around global networks and partnerships, and in terms of alliances and that UCD is part of. That really actually strengthens some of the initiatives that we might be doing in UCD. But thinking about, I suppose, scale and how we reach such a diverse student population. So there's a number of initiatives from the support side of things. The student advisory service would be one very good example of how we offer kind of a similar level of service across the campus in terms of support mechanisms. So each program area would have a designated student advisor that students would know that they can reach out to if they're struggling to navigate the university systems and process, or if they have any personal issues that they want to talk through that might be preventing them from progressing academically. They're also a referral point in terms of accessing counselling, mental health supports, and so on. Thinking about maybe some of our work with the student health service in UCD to try and ensure that we can streamline some of the questions and queries that come from such a diverse student body as well, particularly at the pre-arrival stage, right? So thinking about students coming from all corners of the world, but thinking about maybe health needs, right? So we noticed that there was a significant volume of queries coming into our student health service about maybe medications or access to treatment, or how how the health service works in Ireland. So through a collaborative initiative between my team and the Student Health Service, we managed to create, a toolkit of videos, of FAQs, we even set up a link with the UCD pharmacy where an international student could email the pharmacy in the university to inquire about medication availability and cost in Ireland. So that took away the pressure from the doctors and the campus facilities in responding to all of those queries. So I think looking at it from a service level, what are the pressure points, whether it's health service, whether it's mental health support, student advisors, peer mentors, and looking at where the pressure points and how can we be more efficient in our delivery of that through collaboration between the international office and the services themselves. So I think that would be probably my answer to that, as to how you manage that at scale, is breaking it down, but also leveraging maybe good practice from the alliances and networks that your university is part of as well.
I mean, you have to think of it, I think, in terms of the academic context as well as within the classroom. So certainly UCD has gone very much towards active learning environments, so that even within a large classroom, that the students are working in small groups within the classroom and giving them opportunities to interact with each other. So even though the overall class size might be big, there are opportunities for closer contact between the academic and members of the class, or through, it does require resourcing. It can come through tutors as well, that you're breaking them down into smaller groups and giving the students opportunity. It may not be quite one-to-one, but at least having that closer connection from an academic point of view, which is very important. And I saw a question within there as well in relation to picking up mental health issues. That is one of the ways, the sense of engagement. So attendance at UCD classes for the vast majority of our programs is not mandatory. So it's engagement in the material, discussion points, are they completing assignments, are they missing deadlines, are all kind of the telltale signs of not settling in and not engaging. But there is no question about it that it does require resources. If you're dealing at the scale that we are within our university, and still to have the services personalized as will make it effective for the students to flourish, both from an academic point of view and a personal perspective.
Thanks so much, both. So another question coming from the audience is how you approach belonging for undergraduate students versus graduate students. What are some of those differentiating factors in your strategies around creating sense of belonging?
Yeah, I might just briefly comment on that, and then maybe Jan, you might have some perspectives as well. I think it's really about looking at where the students at and where they're motivated, right? So we do a lot of work with postgraduate students, linking in with the career service and the alumni office. So thinking about for example, we've created a Jumpstart program. Well, the Careers Network in UCD has created a Jumpstart program, which is specifically aimed at international students to understand the Irish jobs market and to understand how to navigate that, right? So that's speaking directly to international students who are really focused on their careers. And by connecting them with alumni as well, that's really getting more buy-in and engagement. I see my colleague Rachel is in the chat as well, mentioning about the alumni buddy program. So we noticed that there was actually maybe a gap in buddy mentorship type programs for postgraduate students, because we don't have as many people to be the buddies, right? Because they've all graduated and moved on. So through a collaboration between UCD Global and the alumni office, we created an alumni buddy program, which connects alumni as buddies for international postgraduate students. And that has been a really beautiful initiative, actually, because the alumni are so invested in making sure that the students have as good an experience maybe as they had at UCD. And they do weekend walks. Sometimes they get invited home for Christmas dinner. I think one of the buddies was a bridesmaid at a wedding recently. So when we think about integration, I think I heard somebody mention recently that integration, a sign of integration is if you get invited into the person's home, right? So thinking about these spaces and ways that we can move beyond just maybe attending an event, but actually where we can move out into the community together. And by going on walks together or going for meals together and sharing life and culture together, I think that's really appealing to the postgraduate cohort, whereas the undergraduate cohort are very focused on building their sense of connection on campus, whether it's through societies or opportunities, or just even finding themselves a little bit, right, rather than finding others. So I think maybe that's where Jan speaks to you about the society engagement and finding that sense of identity within the community.
And I see Jan shaking his head vigorously there. Jan, can you add to this?
Well, definitely, Caroline mentioned it completely as I see it. We need to realize probably that the definition of belonging is different for the different student groups. So in undergraduate students community, which I can speak mostly for, we also need to realize, or my important realization was that it is a little more culturally homogeneous. So obviously UCD is very global university, but that rather applies from my perspective and to like exactly to the postgraduate students. For example, my science course was mostly or is predominantly made of domestic students. So for example, there the question of belonging is a little different, the objectives, but definitely, as Caroline said, maybe for many undergraduate students, it is also about finding themselves and finding their place in the community and in the wider society again.
And it
I think
sounds
it's
like
the time frame on campus. Sorry, the time frame on campus is very critical for the three groups that are mentioned as well. So typically an undergraduate has 4 years. That the cohort that Caroline is largely dealing with from a postgraduate point of view are just here for 12 months. So it has to be very intense. They have to hit the ground running. They're investing in their education for an employment point of view. So all of those things have to be front loaded. And then, with Emer made reference with regards to some of our study abroad students, they're only here for 12 weeks. So that's really intense, so Emer referenced some of the trips. So, we need to have that bonding happening very early, get them integrating very early compared to what Jan is undertaking, which is a 4-year program where you've more time to adjust and assimilate. So the time that we have students from overseas on campus and indeed our national students does make a very big difference as to how we approach that sense of belonging.
So we have that 4-year, and then now we're talking about condensing that down to a 12-month program and creating that sense of belonging. And I'm seeing comments in the chat about short-term summer programs. So any strategies that you can share to foster a sense of belonging when we're talking about even shorter-term programs, such as a summer one? Thoughts?
I think Emer, you probably have some thoughts on that, right, from the study abroad perspective.
Yeah, well, even we have students who spend time at UCD in the summer, and I think like for us, it's an introduction to what it might be like to study abroad, and so that works really, really well. And kind of the programming is really enriching. There's lots to do even in that short 3 to 6 weeks. Then our students come and study abroad, and I guess for me the continuity is many of them now are starting to return for graduate studies to UCD as well. So I think that whole experience that they had at all of these different touch points along the way really does influence their choice then for further international graduate studies. So I think, again, it says so much, it speaks so much to the experience that they have. And that would be academically, socially, personally, in all of those different ways, and in very, very different ways. Our graduate students, we have much smaller numbers, but they definitely feel an attachment to place and a real sense of the community. But again, I loved how Caroline put it, that it's not necessarily all just into campus, but it's out into the community. And for us in Notre Dame in Dublin or Notre Dame in Ireland, it's about building long-lasting connections to the country. And so what we're kind of hoping is, yes, it's an education experience, that they come back and visit, potentially come back and work sometime. We want all of these amazing leaders to come back as innovators and to bring that kind of message forward. So I think it kind of comes full circle in many different ways. And we just have to understand where the person is at and meet them exactly there and kind of nurture that to help them thrive at that point in time.
And I think, Emer, you mentioned earlier about it happens before they come. And I think particularly for summer schools, typically for summer schools, parents are very invested. So, you know, they're typically quite early in their educational program. So we would do a lot of online events. So the parents are aware of what the summer school will look like. They have opportunities to ask questions. So they've engaged in the country, they've engaged in the city, they've engaged in the university, and then ultimately the program before they arrive on campus. So a lot of it is done in pre-departure mode. And indeed for a lot of our activities in China, where the parents are particularly engaged. We've introduced sessions for the parents, and that works really well. They get, you know, the opportunity to ask all of the questions they're concerned about, get the reassurances that they need, get an understanding. So particularly when it's small stretches of time, the more you can do in country to prepare them before they come, I think the better. And then they feel they understand it and maybe have got over some of the preconceptions that they have had from maybe a stereotypical view of what Ireland is or isn't. So I think that's important as well, that they're prepared in advance.
Thanks so much, Dolores. And Emer, something that you mentioned is really hearkening some research that I've been interested and involved with lately around short-term programs and how they can serve as a catalyst or a springboard for further international experiences. And the research that's available is very clear on that this is often that exact springboard that sparks something, that ignites something within someone that wants them to further their international experiences. And I know that UCD in the summer programs also involves K-12 students, secondary students, getting them on campus and starting that sense of belonging and that love for all things international at even an earlier level than undergraduate. So well done on that. We have just time enough for one more question. So I'm going to ask about considerations that you can make in terms of how students access the sheer quantity of information, or how do you engage with all of these resources? And I'm going to start with you, Jan, on this, because I think you were pretty clear about having some strategies around this. How do you ensure that you're connected with the information in a way that suits you?
That is a very complex question, and I have to say that it is again maybe about finding that one spot. And for example, when it comes to student societies, always comes to their social media. They always, as I see it here, also in the question about the online community. So all of the student organizations are very active on their social media, and they know this is how they can engage with their students and how they like even prepare them. You know, I myself, I was following many of the organizations I wanted to join even before I enrolled in UCD. So this really just gives students a sense of all the online resources. And then again, it comes to probably specific program when it comes to the academic stuff. So it depends on the school and what resources they can provide. Definitely, the student advisor, which you have mentioned earlier, is a great point and can help students navigate through all the resources, not only related to academic matters.
Thanks so much. Any other thoughts about this, about the vast quantity of resources and really helping students directing students to those that may be of interest to them or those they may not know about yet?
Yeah, I might just add in the point, students obviously as peer mentors, which we've discussed, but in our global lounge we have global guides who are students, and they are employed by our team, and they're in the global lounge space from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Friday. So they're a really good navigation source in terms of because so much information is thrown out to students, right? And you can't retain it all, but they can pop into the global lounge, speak to another student. The global guides can remind them of some of the information that is passed to them. So that's a very helpful resource for helping to manage the sheer volume of information.
Thanks so much. And thanks also for popping that resource into the chat as well. And if you haven't seen that, Caroline has put in a piece of research from Wonky about the 4 pillars of student belonging. Jan,
And Maureen, I'm not sure if we have just a moment to share just some of the other research. I can pop them in the chat, but there's a couple of things that UCD has done in this space and that I think will be of real interest to colleagues on the call. So there's the Belonging Project, which was led by Dr. Emma Farrell at UCD, and that was a really creative exploration of belonging, and it was a collaboration with the National College of Art and Design, and that celebrated belonging through word, through art, through motion picture, and there's some beautiful images and stories online. You can find that by searching the Belonging Project, but I'll put it in the chat as well. And then finally, just to share some research that was done by Professor Catherine Mooney and Dr. Brett Becker on undergraduate computer science students and their sense of belonging, and that's really, really informative, and it really highlights the intersectionality of belonging as well, that gender, race, and ethnicity really impact on a student's sense of belonging, that, you know, it's not the same for everyone and that we have to look at it through that intersectional lens. So just to highlight those two pieces of research from UCD.
Caroline, that's fantastic. If you can pop those resources into the chat, I know that that would be really helpful. And I think that addresses Catherine's question as well. And I wish that we had time for all of the questions, but what I'd ask you to do is to continue the conversation with these expert panelists and to find out more about what UCD does to help foster this sense of belonging. And again, continue your conversations. You can click the green bar below the picture frames to connect with UCD. But just to highlight some of the key pieces that stood out to me in our conversation today was the importance of sense of place, being proactive, volunteering, strong communication skills, alumni engagement, purpose, mentorship, eliminating as many hassles as possible, and navigating assumptions, and perhaps most importantly, meeting students where they are. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, for sharing about your strategies, and from sharing your personal experiences. Have a wonderful day.